For me, bodybuilding has been in my blood. My name is Joaquin Chavez. Originally, I'm from Mexico. I came to the U.S. with my father at the age of 5. And we've resided in the state of Texas ever since. I mean, I've pretty much been here my entire life, so, you know, it's home for me. When I enlisted in the military, what inspired me initially was travel. You know, at that time in my life, I was settling into a pretty decent occupation, a pretty decent job. And it seemed to me that, you know, I was either going to get caught up in the day-to-day and my time to live and travel and experience the world was drawing short. So after a friend of mine enlisted in the Army, I kind of followed suit, and that's what originally motivated me to enlist, was just I wanted to travel. Initially, you know, when you go into the military, as far as picking your actual MOS, the way it works is in the Army, depending on your test course, right, they give you a list of jobs that you can have. And because of my citizenship at the time, I was only eligible for certain jobs, but because of my test scores, I mean, the jobs were very unique, I would say. So when I enlisted, I signed up with 2 MOS, one with a contingency of getting my US citizenship. So initially I went in as a quartermaster and chemical equipment engineer, which, you know, chemical warfare is not very common nowadays. So about a year after I was in that MOS, I was able to attain my US citizenship, and then they gave me another list to pick from, and that's when I switched over to counterintelligence. So then things got a little bit interesting, you know. But overall, you know, it was a good experience in the military. Did Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, and the actuality, my entire career was spent overseas. So, you know, I think out of the 8 years or so, I was only stateside like 1 year. You know, after my deployment in Afghanistan, I decided to get out. I'd sustained some injuries in a pretty bad rollover, and these injuries prevented me from doing certain things. So at that time, you know, things have a way of working themselves out, you know, if you remain positive. And I've been in the fitness industry my entire life, to include previous, you know, to joining the military. I was already a competitive bodybuilder. So my passion for fitness was always there. And after I sustained my injuries, I think I had probably almost 2 years left in my current contract with the Army. So, you know, I was injured, got brought back to the US and reclassified, or basically given another occupation. And at that time, because of my passion for fitness, they made me a unit master fitness trainer. So that's how I finished out my career in the military, which worked itself out perfectly because it allowed me to transition smoothly into the civilian world, having not just, you know, a base knowledge of health and fitness, but now, you know, an actual military trained knowledge of health and fitness too. So that definitely helped out quite a bit. 6 months prior to even getting out of the military, I already had a job. I already was working as I was transitioning out. So, you know, it allowed me to secure a job in the health and fitness industry. You know, at that time, it was with a pretty major gym. And it's a funny thing how the world works, because the guy that actually gave me the job, you know, with really good faith, actually started working for me a couple days ago. and this was 10 years ago. And now we're doing the same thing, and he's working here for me. For me, bodybuilding has been in my blood. My father worked out rigorously, and he's got a pretty decent physique. He's never done anything. I have an uncle who used to compete. So it's one of those things where not only was I around it, but as far back as I can remember, I was attracted by the fact that you could manipulate and change the structure of the body, and because I grew up in the 90s, as you probably did, back then, a lot of the movies and things that we watched, you looked at the characters and they were these muscular physiques, and so I think part of that gets instilled in your mentality of if that's the ideal male body, and you start to look for it and you start to chase it. So for me, that's when I started, and I've never stopped since. My first bodybuilding competition was in 2003, so it was 2023. I've been doing this for 20 plus years. So for me, if you do anything for 20 plus years, you can achieve a mastery of something. And I can, with comfort say I believe I've mastered what it is to be a bodybuilder, because I've been able to do it with a lot of people and myself, and and like I said, remaining positive is the main thing with bodybuilding, but it's very, very psychological more than anything. This is going to sound crazy for most people now, but back then I just grabbed a phone book and I opened it up to the B's for bodybuilding. Not gyms, not just the B's for bodybuilding. And there was Texas Gym, and there was a phone number, and there was an address, and it was not too far away from my home at the time. So I believe I was 16 years old. I went and pulled out a map, because back then we didn't have GPS or any of this stuff. So mapped out my course, and I was like, okay, head to Texas Gym. And I went there, pulled into the parking lot, and outside is this dude, man. It looks like he just got out of prison. I mean, he's tatted, to the top of his head. He's got a cigarette, and he's jacked out of his mind outside of this gym. And I'm like, wow. And I look inside, and it's a bunch of dudes without shirts on. It may sound weird, but I was like, man, this is the spot for me. So, I went in and got my membership. At that time, it was like $40 for the year. For the year, yeah. And I officially started my journey. And shout out to Kim Jones, the original owner of Texas Gym, who's still there. That dude, man, used to write me workouts in note cards. Here you go, man. There's your workout for today. And I would execute, and back then he gave me that opportunity, gave me that positivity I needed, to push while I was there. And to this day, I'm grateful to that, man. I still call, and occasionally we go over there and catch a pump. There's a list. It's not a relatively long list, but from the beginning, the first person that ever coached me was Prince Harrison. So Prince Harrison, he's a pretty big name here in Texas. He's one of the NPC promoters. He does a lot of the bodybuilding shows, and I've worked with Prince since I was 16 years old. Like I mentioned, my uncle at the time was bodybuilding, and he's the one that linked me up with Prince Harrison, which was essentially the first coach I had, and I worked with him for a couple years, competing as a teenage bodybuilder. Then after that, I had the privilege of working with Lorenzo Jones, who's probably one of the most decorated bodybuilders in the state of Texas, without a doubt. And he's an Olympian. He's IFBB pro. He's had the privilege of stepping on the Olympia stage, which is a pretty big honor, I would say, with the amount of pros that are in the circuit now. I worked with him for numerous years, even through my deployments in the military. I would come home, for a week or 2 weeks, or if I was fortunate, a month, and I would immediately seek him out and be like, hey, dude, I'm back in town. I want to train, and we'd get our workout in, and he got me ready to the next stages of the bodybuilding. And as I continued to bodybuild, you know, eventually I started figuring things out for myself essentially, and started kind of developing my own flow, my own rhythm when it came to how I train, how I dieted. And currently, you know, I've had a couple more mentors. Joe Bentley from Project AD, he's been a great friend of mine, you know, from the beginning of my journey here after the military. And currently one of my biggest mentors is Samir Bannout. So Samir Bannout is 1983 Mr. Olympia, and a true gentleman, and really someone who is passionate about the sport of bodybuilding. You know, if you ever get the privilege of talking to that man, bodybuilding still pours out of him. You know, 40 years after his victory, you know, doing something that is almost unattainable. You know, most people don't realize, but at that time, there had been more US presidents than there had been Mr. Olympia. So to be something like that and to do it the way he did it before the age of coaches, you know, that to me is like, wow, that is a true bodybuilder. You know, and he's an artist. And right now, you know, I every opportunity I get that I'm fortunate enough to spend with him, I soak it all up. You know, so I know I've probably missed a few people, but for the most part, those are the ones that really, for me, pop as far as, you know, through my progression in the bodybuilding world. I was a bodybuilder before I was a veteran, before I was in the military. And fortunately, you know, fitness is part of the military. You know, it's your duty to be fit to do certain things, and it requires, you know, not a stringent physicality, but a decent physicality. So going into the military, I was already a bodybuilder. The thing that I loved about, you know, doing what I did prior to that is within the military, I always had a home. You know, anywhere I was stationed in the world, I always sought out a gym. You know, and it didn't really matter whether it was a deployment, whether it was a desert, whether it was a storm, you know, a storm outside, snow outside, you know, the gym was pretty much always open. So it always gave me that home, no matter where I was. So for me, you know, part of that was that, and then exiting out, I still had my home, and now I've built my own home, you know, so, and people are welcome to it, you know, so that's kind of how I always felt, you know, and why I think the military for me was not this, you know, I kept a positive head, and I said, I always got a home, you know, 45 pounds, like they say, right, is always 45 pounds no matter where you are. So for me, that was kind of what kept me sane, I would say. You know, we are a type of species, I would say, in this planet, that we're a communal species. You know, we seek out communities, and it's wise, you know, if you have a goal to achieve something in life, to put yourself around people who have similar goals. So this gym, this is not Planet Fitness. This is the tactical gym, okay? So when you hear that word, you know, it's not, it sounds hardcore, and it's meant to, because we basically are here to do things in a serious, tactful manner, right? And that's my approach towards bodybuilding. So everything that goes on here, for me, you know, it's serious athletes. These are athletes training. This is not someone who's going to the gym to get their sweat on. You know, so it's a serious environment. It has to be taken that way. And that's kind of what's inspired the tactical gym. And we have this community of athletes, right, that look upon each other for support, that look upon each other for motivation, you know, but you're surrounded by that likelihood that you're around people who have that same mindset to push when most people cannot, you know, and that's the idea behind the tactical gym. Is we provide that place where you can go and you can train intensely and you can focus on what you're doing and really, really achieve whatever goal you have, and we provide that community, okay? And that's what I feel like we've done with the tactical gym, and you know, we are a tight-knit community. We're a tight-knit family, I would say. Originally, we were Tactical Sports Nutrition, right? As you can see behind me. That was the original supplement store. So we started with 1,000 square feet supplement store. You were there. Then about a year later, we added, about another 2,000 square feet of a private gym where I trained people. And then we opened up, a secondary store next to it. And then COVID hit, right? And COVID pretty much, it turned the world in another direction, it seems. So when COVID hit and we were shut down, we were, and I say we because, I move as a unit. I have my family, my wife and child who I love, right? We were at a point where, I was getting ready to close a chapter on the health and fitness industry for me being a part of my finance, right? And moving to something different because it just seemed like the world wasn't going in that direction. But things work out, in a funny way, and we actually went all in, and we found this gym where I actually used to train people at this gym. It used to be the compound, and I worked here as a trainer for about a year, and I always loved it. Before I opened up my personal gym, this is where I train people. A lot of people don't know that, so at that time it was owned by somebody else. His name is Jeff. I worked here with him. He gave me the opportunity to do it. Unfortunately, I think the gym went down, went under. I think COVID probably has something to do with it. And we came in, revamped the place up, put equipment in here, and turned it into what it is now. But the bones were already here. So that's how this came to be. And we've been now open for 3 years. I currently still train people. It's something I enjoy doing. I currently just train mostly athletes and the trainers that train people here at this gym. And I was brought up under the pretense of the 33% rule, which means 33% of your time you should spend teaching, because if you teach, you refine your own craft, right? And the other 33%, surround yourself with people who are like-minded, so that you're around people who want to achieve the same things. For me, at this time, I'm more business oriented, so I'm doing other business things, but still doing the bodybuilding thing as my teaching part. And then the other 33% is spent around people who you aspire to be like. So for me, even though I probably shouldn't be training people, just because of a time constraint, I dedicated some time to it, but I enjoy it. So I train the trainers in a very specific way that it's a training style that I've developed over the last 20 years. It's what I do, and it transpires into them, and it transpires into the clients that they train. But we try to be as safe as we can, and it's bodybuilding. It's bodybuilding meets CrossFit, I would say. That's kind of the evolution of what my training has gone over the years. But that's how we do it here, man. One of the things that I'm doing, this year I'm competing in August in the Mr. Mexico. So I got an invite to the Mr. Mexico because of my heritage. And, the president of the federation down there was generous enough to give me an invite, even though typically you have to qualify. You have to win a state show to qualify to compete in the Mr. Mexico. And it's, in Mexico, bodybuilding is still looked at almost as an Olympic sport. So if you do well, the country actually helps out a lot with your expenses and things like that. So they extended that to me and a few of my athletes that I have here. And I'm currently in the process of preparing for that show. And in July, we're actually, myself and Samir, we're going to Guadalajara, where I'm guest posing at a gym. So even though I'm still, amateur and haven't competed in like 10 years, they were generous enough to invite me. And so now that's kind of one of the things I'm getting ready for, is I'm getting ready for the posing and then the Mr. Mexico the following month. So we've been prepping now for 3 weeks. As we speak, they're putting up a sign next door. I have a clinic that I'm opening up with 2 partners, and the clinic is called Age-Wise Performance Clinic. So it's an anti-aging hormone replacement clinic where we offer a lot of different services. We've actually had an in-house doctor prescribing testosterone and things like that for the last 3 years. So it got quite busy for us that we had to expand, and right next door we're opening up this clinic probably next week. And one of the stages, we have it's a 3-stage operation for the clinic. So stage one, we open, we already have, you know, quite a bit of clientele that goes through it. Now it's just gonna be through an actual clinic and not with a physician come in every couple of weeks. We'll have an actual clinic, and then the second stage is a compounding pharmacy. So we left space for a compounding pharmacy 6 months after opening the clinic. And then the third stage is we're opening up several clinics in Mexico to offer procedures that are just extremely costly here, such as stem cells and things like that. So that's one of the big things, you know, and like I said, for me, you know, going down to Mexico and competing, it's a great thing and it's exposure, but that's kind of one of my reasons for wanting to do that kind of a thing, you know. We have the gym, so if anyone needs any help with bodybuilding, coaching, training, anything of that nature, Tactical Gym if you're around the area. We have the clinic opening up next week, so if you need anything that has to do with hormone replacement, you know, testosterone therapy, we will be doing all of that. And you know, I'm big in giving back, and you know, one of the things for me over the last years that's helped me, you know, I've been diagnosed with pretty severe PTSD, and one of the treatments that I have is I have a phenomenal service dog that just has helped, you know, and it's basically changed my life and giving a lot of positivity to my life. And because of what it did for me and, you know, the position where I'm at currently, we actually started a charity. The charity is called TSK9s. And what it is we are donating fully trained service dogs to veterans with PTSD. So tsk9.org, you know, Tactical Service Canines. And they're the most beautiful dogs. It's a breed of American bullies. I mean, it's a soldier's dog. So that's kind of what we have going on, and that for me is the part of the passion project and the giving back as we always should, right? So if you guys are interested or anyone's interested with any of those services or, you know, the charity, check us out.